The stranded explorer crash landing on Xerion Prime. The emergency alarms of the research vessel Terra's Pride screamed their final warning as Marcus Kane gripped the pilot's seat with white knuckles. Through the cracked viewport, the rust-colored surface of Xerion Prime rushed toward him like an angry fist. The ship's engines had failed 3 hours ago, victim to a magnetic storm that had torn through the system's asteroid belt like a cosmic hurricane. Marcus was a xenogeologist, not a pilot. His expertise lay in analyzing alien soil samples and cataloging mineral compositions, not crash-landing damaged spacecraft on hostile desert worlds. But fate had other plans. And as the ship scraped across the rocky terrain in a shower of sparks and twisted metal, he could only hold on and pray to whatever cosmic forces might be listening. The impact threw him against the console, and darkness claimed him for several precious minutes. When consciousness returned, it brought with it the taste of copper and the steady hiss of escaping atmosphere. Emergency lights bathed the ruined cockpit in hellish red, and his survival suit's proximity alarms were painting an urgent picture of his situation. Xerion Prime was not kind to human life. The atmosphere was thin, toxic, and perpetually scoured by winds that could strip flesh from bone. He had perhaps 6 hours of life support remaining, and his emergency beacon was broadcasting into the void with little hope of rescue. The nearest human outpost was 3 systems away, and his mission had been classified as low-priority survey work. The mysterious discovery Marcus gathered what supplies he could from the wreckage: a portable shelter, water recycler, emergency, rations, and his geological survey equipment. The landscape beyond his crashed ship was a nightmare of twisted stone formations and endless dunes of crimson sand. Heat shimmer danced in the distance, and the twin suns cast harsh shadows that seemed to move with malevolent purpose. He was checking his scanner for mineral deposits when the readings spiked. Something large and metallic lay buried beneath a nearby outcropping, its energy signature unlike anything in his xenogeological database. Curiosity overrode caution, a trait that had both blessed and cursed him throughout his career. The scanner led him to a narrow canyon where the wind carved haunting melodies from the rock walls. There, partially buried in centuries of accumulated sand, lay a figure that made his breath catch. She was clearly humanoid but distinctly alien, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light and elongated features that spoke of aristocratic breeding. Her hair was the color of starlight, silver-white strands that moved, despite the absence of wind. Most striking were her eyes, a deep violet that seemed to hold the depths of space itself. She wore robes that had once been magnificent, worked with threads that caught and reflected light in impossible ways. But now they were torn and stained with something that might have been blood. She was dying. Even without medical training, Marcus could see that much. Her breathing was shallow. Her skin had taken on an alarming translucent quality, and when she looked at him, there was a desperate hunger in those alien eyes. The sustenance bond Marcus knelt beside her, his mind racing through first aid protocols. His scanner indicated severe energy depletion, as if her very life force was being drained away. In the emergency pack, he found nutrient bars, water tablets, and a single wrapped sandwich he'd packed for the return journey, a taste of home among the sterile rations. "Hey," he said softly, removing his helmet in the thin atmosphere. "Can you understand me?" Her lips moved, forming words in a language that flowed like music. His universal translator, designed for basic communication with known species, struggled and finally produced a rough approximation. "Sustenance. The old ways. Please." Without fully understanding why, Marcus unwrapped the sandwich, a simple creation of synthetic protein and earth vegetables that had seemed so ordinary just hours before. He helped her sit up, supporting her weight as she took the first bite with trembling hands. The transformation was immediate and startling. Color flooded back into her skin, the shimmer in her hair brightened, and those violet eyes focused with sharp intelligence. She consumed the sandwich with desperate efficiency, and with each bite she seemed to grow stronger. When she finished, she placed her hand over his, and he felt a strange tingling sensation, as if electricity was passing between them. She spoke again, and this time the translator caught more of the meaning. The bond is made. The ancient laws are awakened. You have saved the heir of Altair, and by right of sustenance, our fates are now intertwined. Before Marcus could ask what that meant, the sky erupted with light. The royal rescue ships descended from the heavens like falling stars, their hulls gleaming with the same inner light that had characterized the alien woman. They were beautiful and terrible, vessels that seemed grown rather than built, their organic curves suggesting both flower petals and predator claws. The largest ship settled near them with surprising grace, and from its opened bay came figures in armor that resembled crystallized music. They moved with purpose and precision, but Marcus noticed they approached their rescued princess with something that looked like reverence mixed with relief. The woman, who he was beginning to suspect was far more important than he'd initially realized, spoke rapidly in her native tongue. Several of the armored figures turned to stare at Marcus with what he hoped was curiosity, rather than hostility. "I am Princess Zara of the Altarian Star Empire," she said, now speaking accented but clear standard. "And you, Marcus Kane of Earth, have just become the most important human in the galaxy." Aboard the starship Luminous Dawn, the Altarian flagship, was a marvel that defied human understanding of engineering. Corridors seemed to reshape themselves as they walked. Walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that suggested a living ship, and the artificial gravity felt somehow more natural than the mechanical systems Marcus was accustomed to. He was given quarters that were luxurious by any standard, with furniture that molded itself to his form and walls that displayed calming views of nebulae and starfields. But he was also clearly a prisoner, albeit a pampered one. Princess Zara visited him as the ship accelerated toward the Altarian home system. She had changed into robes that seemed woven from captured light itself, and her bearing left no doubt about her royal status. "You must understand," she explained, settling onto a chair that grew from the floor to accommodate her. "What happened on Xerion Prime was no simple rescue. The sustenance bond is an ancient law, dormant for millennia but still encoded in our genetic memory. When you offered me nourishment in my hour of greatest need, you invoked something that predates our current civilization." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature control. "What exactly does that mean for me?" "It means," Zara said with a mixture of wonder and concern, "that you are now considered a member of the royal family, not through blood but through an act of compassion that our ancestors valued above all others. The bond cannot be broken, only transferred or superseded." "And if I don't want to be bonded to alien royalty?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Zara's violet eyes held sympathy but also steel. "Then you will need to survive what comes next, because word of this bond will spread, and there are those who will see it as either an opportunity or a threat. The Altarian Empire has been in decline for decades, torn by civil war and threatened by enemies who would see us extinct. Your arrival, and the ancient laws your actions have invoked, may be the catalyst that determines whether we survive or fall into darkness forever." Through the transparent walls of his quarters, Marcus watched strange stars wheel past, each one representing a sun he'd never seen and worlds he'd never imagined. Somewhere among them lay his future, bound now to an empire he didn't understand, and a princess whose very existence had been myth just hours before. The sandwich that had saved her life had also changed his forever. The Empire's last hope, the Council of Whispers, the throne room of the Altarian flagship Luminous Dawn, defied every expectation Marcus had formed about alien architecture. Instead of cold metal and sterile surfaces, the chamber seemed grown from living crystal, its walls pulsing with soft bioluminescent patterns that responded to the emotions of those within. The ceiling soared impossibly high, disappearing into a swirl of captured starlight that made him dizzy to contemplate. Marcus stood beside Princess Zara, acutely aware that his simple exploration suit looked absurdly out of place among the flowing robes and crystalline armor of the assembled Altarian nobles. The council members themselves were a sight to behold. each one bearing the characteristic features of their race but with subtle variations that spoke of different bloodlines and planetary origins. At the center of the gathering sat High Regent Vextar, an ancient Altarian whose skin had taken on an almost translucent quality with age. His eyes, the same violet as Zara's but clouded with centuries of experience, studied Marcus with an intensity that made the human feel like a specimen under a microscope. "The sustenance bond," Vextar spoke, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "has not been invoked for over 3,000 years. Some among us believed it to be merely legend, a romantic notion from our primitive past." A younger noble, her armor decorated with what appeared to be living vines, stepped forward. "High Regent, surely we cannot allow ancient superstitions to dictate policy in these crucial times. The human is an outsider, ignorant of our ways and responsibilities." Marcus felt Zara tense beside him, but before she could respond, he found his own voice. "You're right," he said, causing a ripple of surprise through the chamber. "I am an outsider. I know nothing about your politics, your traditions, or your enemies. But I do know what I saw on that desert planet, a dying person who needed help, and I know what any decent being would have done in that situation." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, unexpectedly, High Regent Vextar began to laugh, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Spoken like a true heir of the ancient bloodlines," the regent said. "The bond chooses worthily, it seems." The shadow of civil war in the privacy of the royal quarters, Zara explained the true scope of the crisis facing her people. Holographic displays showed star charts marked with zones of conflict, refugee movements, and the stark red indicators of lost worlds. "The Altarian Empire once spanned 1,000 systems," she said, her fingers dancing through the light projections. "We were explorers, scientists, artists. Our ships carried knowledge and beauty to the far reaches of the galaxy. But power corrupts, even among my people." The Civil War had begun decades ago when a faction of Altarian nobles calling themselves the Purity Coalition had declared that their race's destiny lay in genetic perfection and isolation from lesser species. They had seized control of the outer territories, enslaving or exterminating non-Altarian populations and turning once peaceful worlds into fortress factories. "My father, the Emperor, tried to maintain unity," Zara continued, pain evident in her voice. "He believed in the old ways, in cooperation and mutual growth. The coalition saw this as weakness and began their rebellion." Marcus studied the tactical displays, his analytical mind automatically processing the strategic implications. "You're losing," he said bluntly. "We have been losing for years," Zara admitted. "The coalition controls the resource-rich outer systems, while we hold only the core worlds. Our fleets are outnumbered 3-1, and worse, they have allies." The hologram shifted to show massive angular ships of clearly alien design. These vessels looked nothing like the organic beauty of Altarian craft. Instead, they resembled predatory insects built from shadow and nightmare. "The Void Syndicate," Zara explained. "They are pirates, slavers, and worse. The coalition has promised them Altarian territory and technology in exchange for their military support." The ancient arsenal it was High Regent Vextar who revealed the true significance of Marcus's bonding to the royal line. In a chamber deep, within the ship's living core, ancient mechanisms hummed with patient energy waiting for the proper authorization to awaken. The sustenance bond was not merely ceremonial, the regent explained as they descended through corridors that grew progressively more organic. It was a safeguard, created by our ancestors when they realized that absolute power could corrupt even the most noble intentions. The chamber they entered defied description. Walls curved in impossible geometries, covered with symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. At the center sat a crystalline structure that pulsed with inner fire, responding to their presence with increasing intensity. "This is the heart of memory," Vextar said. "It contains the genetic locks that protect our most dangerous technologies. Only those bonded to the royal line through blood or sustenance can access its secrets." Marcus approached the crystal hesitantly. When his hand touched its surface, the world exploded into sensation. Images flooded his mind. Vast fleets of Altarian, ships moving between stars, weapons that could reshape reality itself. Defensive systems that turned space itself into a barrier against invasion. The ancient arsenal, Zara whispered beside him. Weapons our ancestors created and then sealed away when they realized the temptation of absolute power. Why show me this? Marcus gasped, pulling his hand away from the overwhelming contact. Because, Vexter said solemnly, the enemy has found us. The Void Syndicate strikes. The attack came without warning, as the best attacks always do. Marcus was in his quarters, trying to process everything he had learned, when the ship's living walls, suddenly, turned a deep angry red. Alarms that sounded like the cries of wounded animals echoed through the corridors. Through his transparent walls he could see them, the nightmare ships of the Void Syndicate, their hulls crackling with energy weapons that turned space itself into a weapon. They moved with predatory grace, surrounding the Altarian fleet like wolves circling wounded prey. Zara burst into his quarters, her ceremonial robes replaced by armor that seemed to be made of crystallized light. "They've found us," she said unnecessarily. "The coalition must have shared our location." "What do you need me to do?" Marcus asked, surprising himself with his calm. She stared at him for a moment, perhaps seeing something in his expression that she hadn't noticed before. "Can you fight?" "I'm a geologist," he replied. "But I'm also human, and humans have been fighting for survival since we climbed down from the trees. The battle for Altair's future." The command center of the luminous dawn was chaos organized by desperation. Altarian officers moved with fluid grace between control stations that grew from the floor like crystalline flowers, their hands dancing through holographic displays that showed the battle unfolding around them. Marcus found himself standing beside Admiral Catherine, a grizzled veteran whose armor bore the scars of 100 battles. The Admiral's violet eyes held respect as he gestured to the tactical display. "Your people," the Admiral said. "They are known for their strategic thinking, yes? Tell me, human, what do you see?" Marcus studied the swirling patterns of ship movements, the energy signatures, the positioning of forces. His analytical mind, trained to read the geological history of planets in layers of rock and mineral, began to see patterns in the chaos. "They're hurting you," he said suddenly. "Look at the attack vectors. They're not trying to destroy your ships immediately. They're forcing you into a specific formation." Admiral Kethran's eyes widened as he saw the pattern Marcus had identified. "By the ancient light," he breathed. "They're driving us toward the gravity well of the system's primary star." "Not just that," Marcus continued, his excitement growing as the strategy became clear. "They want you clustered together for a single massive strike, but they're making the same mistake that predators often make. They're so focused on the hunt that they're not watching for the trap." "What trap?" Zara asked, joining them at the tactical station. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since this adventure began, he felt truly useful. "The one we're about to set. The heart of memory awakens." Plan was audacious, dangerous, and utterly human in its combination of calculated risk and desperate hope. Using his bond to the royal line, Marcus accessed the heart of memory once more, this time with purpose rather than curiosity. The ancient arsenal contained weapons beyond imagination, but it also contained something more subtle and perhaps more powerful. The technological foundations of Altarian civilization. The ability to grow ships instead of building them, to turn matter itself into tools of creation rather than destruction. "The Void Syndicate expects us to fight like warriors," Marcus explained as the heart of memory responded to his touch, awakening systems that had slumbered for millennia. "But what if we don't fight at all? What if we transform?" The process was unlike anything in human experience. The luminous dawn and her escort ships began to change, their living hulls flowing like liquid crystal, reshaping themselves according to patterns encoded in the heart of memory. Weapons disappeared, replaced by projectors that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. When the Syndicate's final assault came, expecting to find clustered prey, they instead encountered something unprecedented. The Altarian fleet had become a single entity, a living system that turned their own attack energy back on them, transforming weapon fire into raw matter that built new defenses even as the battle raged. The new alliance, the aftermath of the battle, saw the Void Syndicate in full retreat, and news of the victory spreading throughout both loyal Altarian space and the rebellious Coalition territories. More importantly, it demonstrated something that gave hope to a dying empire, that the old ways and new ideas could work together. Marcus stood with Zara on the observation deck of the transformed flagship, watching as refugee ships from Coalition territory approached under flags of truce. The Civil War was not over, but for the first time in decades there was hope for peace. The sustenance bond, Zara said quietly, was never really about obligation or duty. It was about choosing to help someone in need, regardless of the consequences. And now? Marcus asked. She smiled, and in that expression, he saw not just a princess or an alien, but a friend. Now we build something new, an empire based not on conquest or genetic purity, but on the radical idea that people, human, Altarian, or otherwise, are worth saving. Through the transparent walls, stars wheeled in their ancient dance, and somewhere among them, the future waited to be written. The sandwich that had started it all was long forgotten, but its legacy would endure, proof that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could reshape the galaxy itself. The Terran-Altarian alliance was born not in conquest, but in compassion, and it would change the course of galactic history forever.